Welcome to the Mongoose Internet Audio Show. Today's subject of interest involves thought reform in public education. As early as the 19th century, those involved in the business of education have perceived the family as a threat to its dominance over the minds of children. The government has always been intimately involved in the educational process, yet children were beaten and abused by unaccountable teachers until recently. Today they drug the younger students to control their behavior if the behavior deviates from their monopoly of control. This is a deliberate chemical attack on the student which benefits the pharmaceutical corporations considerably. Different and more psychological methods, which includes techniques used in brainwashing as well as cult indoctrination, are used with the older students as well as with the younger students. The best interest of the student is obviously not the priority of government involvement. The term government is derived from the words to control minds. Therefore, it is no surprise the government is rooted deeply in the educational system, and mind and behavior control is paramount in the educational process. Government authority is a powerful tool in the mind and behavior control process. When taxpayers, parents, and students can see that they are not getting their money's worth with all this mind control, the educators can point their fingers up to the government God and say, "The devil made me do it, so we have no choice." Unfortunately, at this time in history, which is 2009, the bulk of educators are eager to participate in mind and behavior control with a government that empowers them by protecting them from effective parental and student retaliation. They love this bodyguard protection and are often quick to abuse their power because of this protection. Now that I've covered the cause of the mind and behavior control abuse that students must endure, I will now explain how brainwashing and cult indoctrination works and how it is extensively applied in the educational system. I will also cover medical problems that often occur as a result of these abuses. Brainwashing, or the milder term thought reform, is ultimately the manipulation of social influence. Its success relies upon three primary tools: compliance, persuasion, and education. This involves the use of fear, guilt, and greed. Authoritarianism is used to break down the student's resistance. This is the use of fear to coerce compliance. For example, a blatantly right-wing teacher named Professor Peterson at Foothill University would rant his anti-abortion views with Andrea Yates comparisons. He told his students that a mother who has a doctor murder her unborn babies and a mother who drowns her children in the bathtub are not different. Anyone who challenged him was told that they were wrong and did not understand ethics. Women in the class were singled out and ridiculed, using them as examples. Several of them had to leave. One woman was reduced to tears, and then he told her that it didn't matter what she received on the exam, she would get an F. Enrollment went down. Students became afraid to disagree because of his obvious targeting. He deducted significant points from a female student who wrote an essay on a film from a feminist viewpoint. He would pretend to have misplaced them so he could lower their grades, and they couldn't prove their grades should be higher. The dean and the faculty refused to help the student. They knew what the teacher did was highly unethical, but they behaved like cops, standing around watching someone get beat up and doing nothing to help. Appealing to one's wants and needs is how you use greed to change attitudes. If the student goes along with the teacher's thought control methods, he or she is rewarded with good grades and social acceptance. If the student disagrees, he or she will get a lesser or failing grade, as well as a myriad of retaliation techniques that will cause the student to feel socially rejected and shunned. The possibility of better grades and advancement in the system appeals to the greed of the students. Manipulating the students' need for social acceptance and convincing students that social acceptance and recognition means everything is a powerful thought reform tool. On the other hand, if you can't beat them, join them. In short, the manipulation of dependency on the authority for one's success in education and life is combined with methods of isolation in the form of teacher or faculty retaliation, which includes ostracizing the student, often recruiting other students as well, as I will point out later. You don't have to be alone in a room to be isolated. Isolation is a major part of the thought reform process, which is a paramount practice in the thought reform process. The education method, which is sometimes called the propaganda method, aims to manipulate guilt in order to make them comply. This is used extensively by the educational system, particularly in regards to highly sensitive issues. For example, in a class of third graders, the teacher separated the white students and made them list all the reasons why they should feel guilty because they are white. The parents, who are from all sides of the political spectrum, were shocked because these kids were obviously too young for this. The teacher obviously was planting a guilt complex into the children's minds because the teacher was on a political crusade and wanted to infiltrate these young open minds with the teacher's political ideology. Feeling guilty for what you personally did not do is a mental disorder. Fortunately, this particular method of thought control was stopped in that particular classroom, but still goes on in others. Brainwashing is a severe form of social influence combining all three approaches, fear, guilt, and greed, to cause changes in someone's way of thinking without the person's consent or approval, and often against the person's will itself. The idea is to break down the student's root identity so it doesn't work anymore. A new set of behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs are introduced that do work in the controlled environment. A new identity is manufactured so it can replace the individual identity of the student. The threat of violence, which is terrorism, is a tool that is generally used sparingly in the modern educational system. There has always been a tendency to want to put an apple on the teacher's desk. In the past, you would put an apple on the teacher's desk. Today, if you want to put an apple on the teacher's desk, you join in with the teacher by ostracizing the chosen student dissenters from the teacher's thought control methods. This is what cults do. On the other hand, many educators will encourage a psychological assault as well as an intimidation and physical assault by the student peers. When these students are wrongly violated, even to the point of violence, the faculty will do nothing to protect the student or discipline the teacher. The first and foremost tactic in the thought reform brainwashing process, as I mentioned earlier, is to attack the student's identity. The student must be programmed to believe that you are not who you think you are. That sense of self that is so much a part of human existence and survival is systematically attacked, especially the student's core belief system. It is important that the assault on the student's identity is prolonged and repetitious. This is done by having one teacher after another do this. The implementation of guilt is the next important step in the thought reform process. The above tactic of identity assault leads to an identity crisis. As this identity crisis is setting in, the educator must create an overwhelming sense of guilt in the student. An existing sin or a manufactured one, racism for example, is repeatedly used to attack the target's identity. These attacks must be mercilessly employed. When you hear Hitler-esque slogans like zero tolerance, this is the merciless attack principle in full action on a mass scale. The educators must generate a general state of shame. Shame causes the student to feel that this real or manufactured flaw denigrates his or her character to where he or she feels that everything I do is wrong unless I adopt this new belief system. My sin is such a corruption that my entire being is an aberration, and unless I adopt this new manufactured belief system, everything I am and doing is wrong.